The envelope arrived without warning, slipped into the private mailbox outside Tulsi Gabbard's Oahu office on a humid morning. It bore no return address, no fingerprints, only the weight of something meant to be hidden. Inside, a classified memo from the House Intelligence Committee, stamped and dated, the ink sharp as if freshly printed. Tulsi unfolded the pages slowly, the Pacific wind pressing against her office windows. She sat at her desk, a red pen in hand, not out of habit, but because she sensed what she was about to read demanded more than silence. "Let's see what lies look like when they wear suits," she muttered, her voice low but firm, forged from deployments and betrayal. The memo's language dripped with bureaucratic precision, but its implications screamed louder. Directives to reframe findings, delay dissemination, and circumvent internal objections, all circling a name she'd seen too often lately: Hunter Biden. Halfway through the second page, she stopped. The signature stared back at her, unmistakable. "Adam Schiff," she read aloud, then added, "Of course he did." She picked up her secure line and dialed a number she hadn't used in over a year. A former policy aide in Schiff's office who once whispered, "Tulsi, there's more going on than you know." No answer. She tried again, the phone ringing until voicemail kicked in, but the message was gone, replaced by silence. The next day, the number was disconnected. Mainstream outlets stayed silent, fact-checkers absent, the Oversight Committee conveniently occupied elsewhere. Tulsi leaned back in her chair, her body still but her mind racing. "I left the party," she whispered, "but I didn't leave the fight." Her fingers tightened around the memo, gripping a truth too long ignored. She spent the night in her office, cross-referencing documents, tracing source metadata, building a digital map that revealed a machine, deliberate, systematic, weaponized. The next document came through persistence, not accident. Using a back channel from her time on the Armed Services Committee, Tulsi obtained an internal DOJ access log. It detailed expedited FISA approvals bypassing standard interagency review, citing national emergency. One approval, dated October 2020, targeted a former Trump campaign data consultant for foreign influence risk, despite no verified foreign contact. The requesting official? A team led by Schiff's intelligence aides. The source material? An unverified report from a Brennan-aligned firm specializing in behavioral analytics. Unverified intel, Tulsi said aloud, wrapped in patriotism, weaponized like lawfare. What pushed her over the edge wasn't just the FISA abuse. It was an email, dated 3 days before the infamous letter of 51 intelligence officials declaring the Hunter Biden laptop story bore classic earmarks of Russian disinformation. The sender, Mike Morell, former acting CIA director. The recipient, John Brennan. The final line didn't bother with pretense. "This should help us push back on the Trump campaign." Tulsi read it 5 times, her voice cracking on the 5th, not from surprise, but disgust. She called a DOJ contact she'd trusted during Afghanistan policy reviews. "Off the record," he said cautiously, "you're flagged under Tier 2 surveillance protocols. You're not just a political problem. They think you're operational." The air in her office grew heavier, not with fear, but with the awareness that this wasn't about winning. It was about surviving truth. That evening, a text from an untraceable number. "You still have a lot to lose. Don't make us prove it." No name, no explicit threat. But the weight was enough. Instead of retreating, Tulsi booked a podcast with Megyn Kelly, an independent voice unfiltered by Capitol Hill staffers. On air, she laid it out, document by document, naming Schiff and Brennan with a soldier's clarity. They didn't just suppress a story. They suppressed the Republic's right to choose based on truth. She ended with 3 words: criminal referrals filed. When Kelly asked if she feared retaliation, Tulsi didn't flinch. No one is above the foundations of this country, not a general, not a spy, not a politician hiding behind briefings. Her words sparked a firestorm, but Washington's silence wasn't confusion. It was calculation. Within 48 hours, the House Oversight Committee scheduled a clarification session on intelligence integrity, a thinly veiled attempt to discredit her. The summoned were few: Tulsi as a witness, Schiff as a clarifying authority. The stage was set, not for truth, but for spectacle. The hearing room buzzed with cameras and whispers. Pew Research had shown trust in U.S. institutions, media, Congress, intelligence, plummeting to historic lows. Among conservatives, fewer than 9% trusted national media. Among independents, skepticism had doubled since 2020. Yet the same script played out, the same faces in the same room reinforcing control. Schiff entered with the confidence of power without consequence, flanked by allies and shielded by favorable outlets. He spoke softly to the chair, then gestured to a legal aide who submitted a motion. "I move that Ms. Gabbard's speaking time be limited to 5 minutes, per procedural fairness," he said, citing a rule never applied in prior whistleblower hearings. The majority nodded. The motion passed without objection. At the back, John Brennan sat, arms crossed, his silence a show of control. His shadow loomed larger than words. Tulsi entered in a navy blazer, her walk steady, her expression carved from resolve. Fought asemographers hunted for a crack, a tremble, anything to spin into a headline. Schiff leaned forward, his smile not reaching his eyes. "We welcome testimony," he said, "from a former colleague who once stood among us before choosing another path." The room fell silent, and Schiff tapped the table twice. A staffer dimmed the lights, and a screen lit up with a grainy RT news clip showing Tulsi in a studio, her voice clipped out of context. "The United States has long engaged in regime change wars, costing lives, draining resources, making us less safe." The screen cut to black, then a bold subtitle: "Broadcast RT, Russia Today." Schiff turned to the committee, eyes heavy with accusation. "This isn't conjecture. The American people deserve to know when testimony comes from someone who spoke on a Kremlin-funded channel." Tulsi's voice cut through. "Are we branding everyone who criticizes foreign policy a Russian agent? If so, half this body is suspect." Chairman Royce raised a hand. "Ms. Gabbard, hold your comments until your time." She stared in disbelief. "So I'm smeared in real time, but I defend myself after the damage is done?" Royce turned to Schiff. "Proceed." Media accounts flooded with headlines. Gabbard's Kremlin connection. Did she cross a line? Brennan tapped a message into his phone, gave a subtle nod. Tulsi whispered, "They're not afraid of my opinions. They're afraid of my proof." A 2023 Gallup survey showed 69% of Americans believed news outlets prioritized narratives over facts. Yet those narratives shaped careers, elections, crushed dissent. The hearing wasn't about exposing Tulsi. It was about silencing her before she spoke. A young reporter scribbled, "No defense allowed. Optics strong. Schiff leads. Gabbard isolated. The room felt heavier, shadows bolder. Tulsi's fingers tapped the table, a rhythm familiar to battlefields where nothing moved without meaning. Brennan adjusted his glasses, not to see better, but to hide where he looked. A figure in the gallery, mid-30s, clean haircut, government-issued shoes, jotted notes on a pad no reporter carried. He wasn't here to write. He was here to record. Tulsi's aide, Elena, leaned in, whispering, "Someone followed me to the hallway." He didn't speak, but stared like he knew me, like he was reminding me of something. Tulsi's hand clenched the desk, then loosened. A staffer approached, handing her a folded document. "No note," he said, "but it was left for you." Inside, a low-resolution map circled her Hawaii consulting office with 2 handwritten words, Red Falcon. Her breath hitched. Red Falcon was a low-visibility CIA operation, no digital trail, known only to a handful of operatives. None should be talking. She looked up. Brennan leaned forward, fingers crossed, his posture saying, "I know you. I know more." Tulsi sat straighter, not from defiance, but necessity. "They're not challenging my facts," she whispered. "They're testing how far I'll carry them." Schiff saved his final weapon, public humiliation. He stood, tapping a manila folder. "Mr. Chairman, I'd like to enter Representative Gabbard's voting alignment report." He unfolded the pages theatrically. She voted against her party over 19 times, including sanctions, environmental funding, federal appointments. Some call it independence. I call it unreliability. He turned to her. "If you can't stand with colleagues, how can the public trust you?" He added, "She abstained from key legislation when unity was critical against foreign threats, domestic unrest." I don't question her patriotism, I question her positioning. The committee buzzed. A Democratic representative spoke loudly. "What's the point of testimony from someone who couldn't stand with her caucus?" Tulsi let a beat pass, then looked up. "You're quick to quote my record, but not the reasons." Her voice cut like a scalpel. "I opposed legislation weaponizing intelligence against citizens. I abstained when bills were rushed without review. I refused to rubber stamp your oversight. If that makes me a traitor, paint me as one who chose principle over applause." Silence fell, heavier now. The camera caught Brennan, no longer smiling, hands gripping tightly. "You don't fear I'm wrong," Tulsi said. "You fear I'm right, and that the people might see it." The room didn't breathe. Schiff's fingers twitched, a man sensing the game slipping. Tulsi turned to Royce. "With your consent, I'll present verified evidence submitted to the DOJ, never shown to this committee or public." Royce nodded, knowing there was no turning back. The screen lit up with an email, October 18, 2020, from Mike Morell to John Brennan. Subject, Re-Letter Coordination. Tulsi read it sentence by sentence. Morell writes, "Here's the draft. Let me know if any language should be softened. We need it strong for narrative coverage, vague to protect signatures." That wasn't about verifying intelligence. It was about managing optics. She paused. "This should help us push back on the Trump campaign." No metaphors, just raw text, no network dared read. The next slide showed the letter of 51 intelligence officials beside a CNN chyron. Former intel officials say Hunter Biden laptop has hallmarks of Russian disinfo. This letter, Tulsi said, was published on Politico within 12 hours of finalization. Within a day, CNN, MSNBC, The Washington Post built narratives without verifying the laptop. She listed the signatories: Clapper, Panetta, Hayden, McLaughlin, Priest, 46 others, reading each name deliberately. Not one examined the laptop. Not one verified metadata, emails, financial records, iCloud backups. Yet they claimed it looked like Russian disinformation. She stepped closer to the bench. The intention wasn't to protect America. It was to protect a narrative against you, the voter. Senator Collins leaned forward. Are we to understand this letter was coordinated with political intent? Tulsi nodded. Yes. Drafted October 17th. Circulated by the 18th. Published the 19th. Timed before the final debate. The final slide showed a timeline. Media engagement, polling shifts. Pew Research noted 62% of Americans who heard the laptop story believed it fake or exaggerated. Search visibility for the New York Post's article dropped 70% due to algorithmic suppression. Brennan froze, eyes narrowing. Schiff stayed quiet, his side silent for the first time. Tulsi closed the file. I stand here not for retribution, but because no American, Democrat or Republican, should be manipulated by agencies they fund with trust. The room didn't stir. Royce glanced at Schiff, whose demeanor cracked like porcelain. Schiff cleared his throat. The documents, while provocative, remain unverified for legal applicability. None meet the evidentiary threshold for criminal referral. His voice trembled, betraying a man grasping at a fading defense. Tulsi stepped forward, holding a darker folder. Restricted. Red Falcon Behavioral Flagging Prototype. Perhaps this will meet your threshold, she said, her tone cold. She projected a 2019 DHS-CIA chart detailing an AI model classifying citizens by metadata, online history, religious affiliations, and anti-authoritarian views. She turned to Brennan. You authorized this system, profiling veterans, conservatives, libertarians, even colleagues as extremists. Screenshots from an internal Slack thread followed, one reading, Tulsi's following is unpredictable. Anti-war, anti-intel, hybrid base. Flag for elevation. A hush fell, the evidence unignorable. Tulsi's voice rose in moral clarity. You labeled dissent as danger. You weaponized code over context. You turned democracy into a dashboard of suspicion. Brennan didn't reply, his silence deafening. A journalist whispered, Brennan's frozen. Schiff has no floor. Something broke loose. Tulsi lowered the file, her shoulders sloping, not from defeat, but from the weight of truth. Royce exhaled. Due to the sensitive nature of these disclosures, this hearing will recess. The committee will enter closed-door deliberations and a confidential vote. No outbursts, only the scrape of chairs. Outside, reporters gathered, silent, recognizing a hearing where silence spoke louder than spin. The committee deliberated for 3 hours, staffers exchanging files, counsel reviewing limits. The question wasn't ideological, but constitutional. What happens when truth breaches protocol? At 4:47 p.m., the committee returned, faces unreadable. Royce opened the folder. The vote wasn't unanimous, but decisive. By 9-3, the committee recommends a formal ethics investigation into intelligence overreach and misuse of classification authority. No names were listed, but none were needed. Headlines posted, Oversight Committee breaks rank, probes Brennan-era protocols. Party leaders scrambled. Intelligence officials lawyered up. 3 surveillance contracts were suspended. Schiff remained seated, staring forward, no longer confident. Tulsi stood, gathered her folders, and turned to the exit. This was never about taking power, she whispered to her aide, but showing who has too much. The news pivoted to elections, distractions, controlled outrage. But in D.C., the aftermath was surgical. Within 72 hours, Red Falcon was suspended under audit. The DOJ initiated a review of classification practices. Brennan was subpoenaed, his team silent. Schiff's security clearance was downgraded, and a bipartisan call for censure emerged. Back in her office, Tulsi framed the Morell-Brennan email, not for vengeance, but memory. Below it, engraved, "No one should apologize for telling the truth." An intern asked, "Did it change anything?" Tulsi paused, looking at the email's reflection. "I don't know," she said. "But if I hadn't said it, no one would have." She turned off the TV, tuned to pundits debating polls, no mention of the hearing. At her desk, she opened a laptop and typed, "Declaration of Integrity against the Algorithmic State." She wrote, "Not for publication, but because silence, once cracked, becomes air others can breathe."